Thank you for joining us for this Q&A discussion with the Ellensburg School District about the middle school bond proposal. I'm Joanna Markell, I'm the editor of the Daily Record, and I'll introduce the other folks here in the audience, or here on the podium. We have Steve Selleck from KXLE, who will be joining me in asking questions of the school district. Jim Pappas, who has been a member of the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee. Next to him is Paul Ferris, the superintendent of the Ellensburg School District. Michelle Beevich, the principal of Morgan Middle School. And Joanne Hillman, who is also a community member on the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee. Thank you all for joining us. Just so everyone knows, we did ask representatives from the Pro Remodel Group, Modernize Our Morgan, to be with us today, and they declined. But we've been talking with them over the course of this discussion, for the newspaper anyway. Ballots for this special election went into the mail last week and are due on April 23rd. The district is asking voters to approve a $38.9 million bond for a $48 million new school near Valley View and Ellensburg High School. I've collected some questions from our readers, and I know Steve has some too, and we'll just fire away. We received, to start off, and I don't know if anyone wants to introduce, maybe add to my description of the bond proposal. Okay, I will launch right in then. We've received some questions from the public about how the property tax rate will work and how it's structured and the interest payment. Maybe if one of you could describe that.
I can try to do that. What the committee wanted to do was they didn't want taxes to increase any more than $1. And they went through and they took a look at about 34 different scenarios that was presented by a representative, John Gores, who's with D.A. Davidson. And what they looked at was, or what they finalized with, was to have a 98-cent increase over what the current rate is. The current rate for the high school bond is $1.21 or $1.23, and therefore a 98-cent increase would take the rate to $2.21, and that would only be for 8 years. After the 8 years, the high school bond is paid off, and the rate would decrease 55 cents down to $1.79 for the next 12 years. And it was something that the committee took a long look at. One of the things that they wanted to do is they structured it over a 20-year time frame. They looked at a 15-year time frame, a 20-year time frame, and also a 25-year time frame, and decided that with a 15-year, obviously you're going to be paying more. With a 25-year, or you'd be paying more up front. With a 25-year, you'd be paying more in interest. And so they decided that to go with a 20-year time frame. And part of that also was to allow, as more people come into Ellensburg, to share in that cost of the middle school project.
One of the questions I keep hearing that's brought up all the time is, and it may be apples and oranges, but I got to ask it. They said they got a really nice high school out in Kittitas that didn't cost anywhere near this, and I'm sure you probably heard this.
We have, and Kittitas, it is a really nice high school. It was completed in 2006. If you recall, we completed our high school in 2005. The cost of that building was less than $15 million in 2006. However, one of the things that people have to keep in mind is that building is a secondary school. It's 6th grade through 12th grade and houses 350 students. So it's half the size of what Morgan Middle School is. When you take that into account, as well with inflation that's occurred in the construction industry since 2005, you see that when we take a look at costs, we look at averages for the construction industry in 2012 in order to come up with the rate for the new middle school.
And so we're building a school for 900 as opposed to 300 or 350 that Kittitas was. There's special needs There are special requests, like the gymnasiums, that will be in the school we're thinking about, hopefully, we will. There's the theater. It's very difficult to do comparisons. We have made an attempt to do that as a committee with CLUB, with the architect presenting various scenarios before us, real buildings that were built, and you can't do a real good job. You know, so the other day, a friend said, you know, why don't you just use the architectural plans, download them off the computer, and why did we have to pay, whatever he said, you know, $40,000 in architectural fees? Because the needs of each community are different. Even though you need science labs, you need gymnasiums, you need various classrooms. Michelle Vivich's staff and teachers put before us what the needs of the teachers would be for, you know, something that would have currency to it, and that would fulfill the needs of our community. So it's very difficult to, you know, to do comparisons.
But this is one question, you know, or it's like brought up at the coffee shops and on the street. I hear that, I've heard that a lot. I maybe assume you have too there.
Well, we have, and one of the things that people have to keep in mind is that architectural firms would be glad to sell us their plans for about what it would cost us to have our architect develop those plans. And even if we would purchase those plans, say they're 5 years old or 10 years old, construction codes have changed. So then our architect would have to go back through and make adjustments to those changes.
And for the soils condition at our specific site, our local building codes. And they have copyrights on their drawing designs. And so they wouldn't just give them to us. We couldn't.
That I understand. This was brought up, and I know nothing about it, but somebody said, how come that foundation is going to cost so much? I knew nothing about it, you know. Is there something extra special about the foundation, or is that just somebody talking to hear themselves?
Well, there's one thing. One of the things we've heard is that Valley View and the high school are sinking. That was news to me. I didn't realize it. No, I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
What happened was when Valley View was built, there weren't construction managers for the projects. Today, we have construction managers for all the projects. The foundation, or the slab, was not attached to the foundation. And so when there was settlement, it actually caused that foundation, that slab, to buckle a little bit in places. We discovered that problem in 2003. Since then, we've gone in and rectified that problem. But there has been no sinking issues. And there has been absolutely no sinking issues at the high school either. In fact, both Valley View and the high school have been given a very good rating as far as the outside structure, the inside structure, and the other things that are associated with it. So it should have been caught during the construction process at Valley View. It wasn't, because we didn't have a construction manager. And one of the things, other things I've heard, maybe you have too, is why are you building a school for 900 when last year there were only 740 students in that building? One of the things to keep in mind is that some of the least expensive space that you can build is classroom space. The cafeteria, the bathrooms, the science classrooms, the auditorium, those are some expensive spaces. The least expensive spaces are the classroom spaces. And one of the things we found out with the high school, because we had sort of a capacity that we were supposed to be able to have at the high school, was around 1238. Well, we know with the middle school students in there, we're struggling to try to find spots for all those students. So it's actually around 1140 that we're at capacity. So in the design for the new middle school, the thought was that we would have 6 additional classrooms in order to accommodate growth. And if you recall, Morgan has 5 additions to it in order to accommodate growth over the last 80 years. So the thought is to have 6 additional classrooms. One of those classrooms will be used as a prep period for a teacher every period. Therefore, we would have 5 additional classrooms. We figure about 25 students per class. That's an extra 125 students on top of what the 740 is to accommodate growth over the next, hopefully, 80 years.
I wanted to touch on two questions you had. The question about the cost of the foundation. The cost estimate did not break out the foundation for this, the cost estimate for the current bond project. The architects based the cost estimate on, they separated the different types of spaces for the building and applied average costs for Eastern Washington, for recent projects in Eastern Washington, based on the square footages of those different types of spaces. And then they added in some multipliers for geotechnical designs and studies, stormwater mitigation, and geotechnical mitigations in the project. So they didn't break out the cost of the foundation by itself. And I wouldn't guess that our foundation is going to be anything much more elaborate than what you see at any building at Central or the high school.
But this person read it in the internet, so it's gotta be true.
Yes, and so again, with the cost of the Kittitas School versus what the architect estimated here, I just want to point out again that yes, the Kittitas School was outside of the average cost of the school in Washington and even in Eastern Washington. And for us to base our cost estimate on something so far outside the average, I don't think would be wise. I think it's more prudent to use recent cost estimates for Eastern Washington, and that's what ALSC did.
Going back to April, actually, or June, this question came up. In fact, a person came before the committee and talked about the sinking schools, or whatever the headline was. We, Paul asked, the name of the firm is? A geotechnical engineering firm to come. We also have received recently a letter affirming that those fears are not true. They allayed the fears, is a better way to put it. So we
I
have that
wasn't
in
worried,
mind
I
as
just
well.
had heard this question.
But it was a concern, and it came up several times, and we've done our best to answer that question and go to consultants and people who were most experienced in this and to get a correct answer.
They said it was a viable building site. This is the same geotech engineer from the high school.
Well, we're live right now. Ed, it wasn't true. Okay, there we go. Got that straightened out.
Could someone maybe describe the difference between the hard costs and the soft costs and what the soft costs entail?
Would you like me to? The hard costs are typically what the contractor bids, from the bid documents that the architects and engineers produce, and which gets put out on the street for a competitive bid. The soft costs are all of the other costs outside of that, and the architect broke down our costs even further. Soft costs are typically architectural and engineering fees, traffic studies, that sort of thing. And they also broke out other soft costs such as on-site improvements and off-site improvements. I don't have that flyer right in front of me right now, but some of the off-site improvements include the 3rd Street extension, and we're assuming the worst case budget scenario is that we will have to extend 3rd Street to Fenning Road. It's better to be safe than sorry, so they're including the estimate for that work in the project. Others off-site allowances are sidewalks, curbs, gutters, storm and utility connections, traffic mitigations, etc. Some other on-site improvements include relocating some of the sports fields that will be placing this project on the footprint where there's a soccer field and is it baseball or softball field, and also some tennis courts. And so the on-site improvements include moving those ball fields to some new locations. I believe soccer and tennis are proposed south of Capitol, and the softball field would be east of Valley View Elementary.
In terms of the cost. What about chairs, tables?
Oh,
All these,
that is
is
one-
that included?
Furniture and equipment
Okay.
is a big portion of the soft costs also,
Okay.
thank you, yeah.
And that, any hydrology issues, water issues that may show up, is that included in the soft costs? Is there money set aside specifically for that?
Well, yes, that was included in ALSC's cost estimate. On the flyers that went out to people, under soft costs, they're including soils report, testing, contingencies, but then they're including the water and storm utility connections and some of the stormwater mitigations and the site improvement part of the budget. So.
Any more cost-related questions?
So soft costs, all that extra stuff.
Yes, and some of those site improvements might be included in the bid also. They've broken that out separately from the price of the building
And
here.
right away, Finney, I mean, third would be pushed through to Finney. That's not a year from now, that's when the school opens, it'd be that way.
I don't know if that's true.
We're not sure, one, we're assuming that thing will have to be pushed through, but we don't, and if it is, we're not sure when it would happen. We would assume it would be before the school would open.
And we assume it's given from what you hear informally.
There would be a traffic study performed early on in the design process of this project. And I spoke with the city of Ellensburg, and they typically do require a traffic study, and they review that very carefully.
Is that one of those bumps they put over the road that count how many cars? How much
Well,
they charge
might be
you for
one of the
that?
conditions.
You know, it wouldn't be a bad idea, since Joanne has that flyer in front of her, to talk about what the cost of the building is and then the soft costs. It's broken down on the flyer that was mailed out to everybody.
Right, so the building itself, the maximum allowable construction cost is estimated at $25,411,000. Site improvements, like these are the on-site improvements, including landscaping and the ball fields that are moving, is $1.8 million. The soft costs, which also, a big portion of that is 8% sales tax. We do have to pay tax to the state for building a state building. And as well as a construction contingency, which is usually 8 to 10% of your project cost, to allow for any unforeseen conditions, to be able to pay for those. Again, the architectural and engineering costs, testing, furniture and equipment, which is huge in a project like that. That is $15 million for those soft costs, and then the off-site allowance is $2.1 million, and that includes that 3rd Street extension.
Escalation?
Yes, and, sorry. So the total, the escalation is included in those numbers. And so the total project cost is about $48,060,000. And then if you subtract the state match that is expected at $9,160,000, that brings the request for the bond to $38,900,237.
And the reason for that review is that we spent a lot of time going over this with the architect and relying on his architects, I guess you could say, to let us know, with years of experience in putting that budget together, it's got to be pretty accurate, and also trying to work it down as low as we possibly could, because that definitely is a concern of the voters in the last 3 elections anyway, and this one as well.
I was asked to ask you this, and we're building a school for the 21st century. I know you can't anticipate where technology is going to be 5 years from now, but that is incorporated into the plan, I assume.
I think it makes sense to provide infrastructure throughout the building for flexibility and future IT needs. And so that might require running conduit through the walls, not necessarily filling it all with cable. But allowing flexibility for that to change in the future, and I know the university tries to do that as much as possible as well.
Throughout my tenure as an administrator at the university, that's something we always look forward to get those upgrades whenever capital development money came in. That comes not automatically, but it's part of the construction costs. So that's a great benefit.
Michelle, maybe you could talk about some of the technological challenges you've been, or your staff have faced at the current Morgan location and kind of having the students and staff split between two campuses.
Well, at the current site, we were able to, through the Ed Foundation, get a computer lab a couple of years ago, but we ran into exactly what Joanne's talking about with the infrastructure not being there, and so they had to go back into the walls to be able to run networking cables, and so that's been a constant struggle. And then having the electrical availability. So there were, in particularly the old part of the building, there were many classrooms that just had one outlet. And in modern education, when you have a computer, a projector, and a document camera, just to be able to do some of the basic instructional strategies, you've used up your outlet space. And so we faced a lot of those issues. And probably now one of the biggest issues we face, in particular up at the high school, is availability of technology. There's not enough computers available for the number of students that are in the school. And so a teacher just shared with me today that she went to try and get time in the lab to take her students in to do a project, and the first available day was April 25th. And so that takes away any, current practice when you can't have access to the technology.
And a lot of people ask when you're developing a large project like this, that, well, why don't you just rely on wireless access points everywhere, you don't need to wire anything. But even wireless has a limited bandwidth. And so it's like your highway, and how many cars can you fit down your highway? And if you only have a highway of a certain width, and you have all these different students trying to use their smartphones, it's going to get clogged up and you're going to have a traffic jam. So it may be wise to have wireless points, but also have that capability with that infrastructure as well.
You have students using smartphones and texting and stuff?
We don't allow it during school.
But
we
you don't allow it.
Yeah, well, and we do know that, yeah, we know what happens. But we also know that in the future, that's a real possibility. I mean, I know many times, iPads, and I've sat in meetings and looked something up really quickly, and it's there, and that's the current reality. And we don't have a system that supports modern education and modern technology.
I have one more question about cost, because I got a call one morning from a young lady, and her argument didn't do much for me. She talked about there's no air conditioning in Morgan. I said, there's not a baby boomer on the face of the earth that's going to feel bad for you, because, Jim, do they have air conditioning in your school? But I assume there's air conditioning in this new facility, and it's part of the cost.
I think it would be wise for us to plan for air conditioning in the project, but I know a lot of parents and the people with the school district feel that building a green building, a sustainable, environmentally conscious building is important as well. And so some of the attributes of that type of building might include operable windows, allowing natural light in the building, and sometimes that messes with your heating and your air conditioning system, your HVAC system. And so there's a balance there, but I think we would probably plan for air conditioning, but also try to design the building so that it can have passive solar heating and cooling as much as possible and cut down on those energy costs. And it is required that this building meet the Washington Sustainable Schools Protocol, which is similar to like the LEED environmental projects, but so it does have to be designed as a green building too.
I hadn't even thought about that.
I understand that there would be a design process involving the community that would start if the bond is approved. What would that process entail?
Well, It'd be very similar to what would end up happening. Actually, we have two processes that would occur. One is we would want to put together community members and staff with the architect in order to design the facility. And that committee could be as about 35 to 100. As many community people that would want to participate in that process would be welcome to participate in that process. One of the things that we identified for the high school, we had 2 law enforcement personnel on that planning committee. So one of the things they really focused on was to make the high school as safe and as secure as possible. And that's one of the focuses that would also be for the middle school process. And so that committee would work with the architects in order to design the facility. The other piece to it is once the bond is passed, the board wants input from the community and would form another citizens committee in order to give us input on what we should do with Morgan Middle School. That's one of the things that is very important to the board, so they can get that input, because we know that there's a lot of people that want that to keep that building. And we would need to go through a similar process that we did with the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee to bring in the architects, the construction managers, and also probably the mayor, and to help identify what that structure could and how it could be used.
The design phase, which occurs right after the passage of the bond, strings out over a 3 or 4 month period. More than that. And so there's a lot of input there. The design of the building, as you see in that pamphlet, might not be the same.
Well, and when I was mentioning the year, that's including the construction document phase as well as the design.
Okay,
Design
the
phase.
bond passes, when do you open the door and let the students in? How much time?
About 3 years.
Hopefully, if everything went very smoothly, fall of 2015, but up to maybe winter break of, so January 2016. So this year's 5th graders would be 8th graders when it opens.
And that's a very aggressive schedule proposed by the architect to get in fall of 2015. But it can be done if we get moving on it right after the bond.
Would the students stay in the same arrangement they are now in the interim?
Yes. Yeah. There's no space to change anything at this point with what the configuration that we have.
Which leads me to say even before, as many times as we can, the focus here has to be on children, students, our youth. And it's near deplorable at this point. You know, that school was up in 1929. There's difficulty now in moving students back and forth. The focus has to be on a new building, a new facility, and all the other things that come at us. You know, a sinking school, location, what to do, need to be put aside. I needed to say that.
Well, it might be a good time to ask the question, why did the committee decide to build a new school or, promote a new school instead of remodeling the current building? What was the committee's thoughts on that?
Well, we came up with a list of 10 reasons. We did comparisons. I don't have that right in front of me, but however, we listened to the architects. You know, there's a group of consultants, people that came before us. And so we listened to the costs. We listened to what the people from OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, the handbook that was referred to by Joanne. That site, the present site didn't meet those specifications. Safety that Paul mentioned. Parking. There are a whole bunch of reasons in addition to cost that were important for us to make that decision. Major was feedback from the community. All of us would constantly, over a 2-month period, approximately, come back and say, what have you heard, meeting after meeting. After we would learn more, we put all of those things together and finally came up with a decision that the best thing to do would be to build a new school rather than modernize.
As a committee member, I listen closely to what the folks proposing the renovation versus the school district's architect proposed. And while it looked like it might be less expensive to build or to do the renovation on the existing Morgan site, it came in at about $46 million versus our $48 million for the new construction. But in the process of doing that renovation, they would demolish 35,000 square foot of existing building at the Morgan site, which is currently usable and is being used today and is valued at least $5 million. And when you subtract that $5 million worth of equity, you don't come out ahead in the renovation scenario, at least in my eyes. You're $3 million less in equity at the end of it. Also, that site is restricted to 6.8 acres for 900 students, which is well below what OSPI recommends. And there's so much more flexibility at the high school Valley View site. And also many opportunities to share resources such as the football field. And when this middle school builds the Performing Arts Center, the high schoolers are in desperate need of that type of facility as well, and there's a symbiotic relationship happening there. So those were some of the things that really made me think that building new was the way to go. Also, I feel that the design of the building can meet our needs more specifically working with a clean slate than having to be restricted on a certain size site with a certain footprint of the existing building.
There was a limitation in addition to that on the gymnasium that would be in the middle school.
Right, with the remodel, essentially what would happen to the gym, and if you recall, it's just one court right now. With the remodel, essentially, the wooden bleachers would be removed, and that would be what you would gain in gym space. So the gain would be very limited. They would then go to retractable bleachers in that space. The other thing that I always keep in mind is that when I look and go in that building, and if I was to maintain an area, one of the areas I would maintain would be that auditorium. However, it wouldn't be the same sort of auditorium. Essentially, they would turn over half of the seating space into a commons area for the students. When I look at the new high school and the fact that we would have adequate gym space, that we would be able to maintain the 35,000 square feet on what's currently at Morgan to use for other programs. And when I take a look at the fact that in the new the auditorium that is planned is that it would have a larger stage, a larger flight space, a larger wing space, lighting and sound boosts that really are what is needed for today. It made my decision pretty easy.
You talked about a committee looking at what will happen to the old school. So it will stand or it could be torn down?
I would assume that the committee would provide a recommendation to the board.
So there may yet be, in the future, be a bond to either upgrade that facility or tear it down.
Or they could recommend to sell the property, or subdivide the property and sell a portion of it. It's all on the table, I think.
Okay.
We have heard probably 7 or 8 different scenarios for that. But also another one is that, let's say, the property stays there and it's not sold, which I would advocate for. There's rental property, perhaps you could be more specific with it. There's rent being paid to the university for facilities for the alternative school, and there's 2 other.
We have 3 or 4 programs that we're currently paying rent for. Parent partnership program, our developmental preschool program, that's at Central, which is a special ed program for birth to 5, our alternative high school program, and the cost of those rental space is about $42,000 a year. And so we would have an opportunity to utilize the newer sections of Morgan once the building is built to house some of those programs.
Steve, it was very difficult for people I talked to as well as myself to go to Morgan Middle School, the present site, stand there in the morning and look at it, which many of us did, I know I did, day after day, and just watch the traffic come in and just kind of visualize a modernization as a, weighing in on this decision. And thinking that the two newest buildings on the west side of that campus would be torn down. And it just didn't make sense to me. And then working on modernizing the older part of the building. It's just, I don't know, I figure my tax dollar and other people that were communicating this to me, told me it didn't make sense.
So is it likely that the newer wings would still be used for school district use?
It could be.
It could be, yes.
Is that where the current, where your office is, still in the middle section there of the, where it's been for years? Is
Yeah.
that- It is,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
And
it's the section that would be to the
Okay.
east, that is,
That would be closed, yeah.
yeah.
Right now we have, those two sections to the west of the lobby are used, and then we created a hallway to get to the other side where the gymnasium and the arts classes are still used on that end of the building, in the portion that wasn't part of the three-story structure.
Is the band room now at the high school? For the middle-
We still use the band room because that's in that, there's a portion of that part of the building that was not part of the original structure, and so it's built differently and doesn't have anything above it. So we were able to continue to use those,
Okay.
but certainly we overlap all of our programs at the high school, all of our elective programs.
It does have interesting architecture, in terms of, it's, I saw a picture of the old facility, and I really liked it, it was grand, but it's got some cousins next door that don't look good. Well, sitting next to it, they don't look good. Yes.
Speaking of the performing arts and gym, that tends to generate some discussion in the community. Why 2 gyms at the new school, and why include the performing arts center?
I think one of the biggest reasons for the 2 gyms is just volume of kids. When we have the 3 grade levels together at any given time, we could only have 4 classes assigned to take PE at once. And even at that, it's packed. We're talking 100 to 125 students in the gym space. And the gym that we currently have is truly just a court. There's hardly even sidelines there. And so to have instructional space, we have an incredible physical education program. They've gained national notoriety for their lifetime fitness program, and we want them to be able to have the students engaged in that rather than trying to. I was amazed my first year to, in the wintertime, see the students rollerblading around in the hallway because that was the only space that was available. Right now, the safety issues, running stairs and using the spaces that they had. So truly, it's an instructional space. And then there are other benefits as well to the community with gym availability and.
one of the things that our athletic director has done ever since Eric Davis, ever since he came into the position, was we try to hold as many athletic events as we possibly can at Ellensburg School District. Regional wrestling, state basketball. We'll host the 1A state basketball tournaments. We bring in as many opportunities as possible because we know that the taxpayers pay for this, and we want to kind of put back in the community that these individuals are going to be buying food, staying in hotels, shopping locally. And so what we really focus on being able to do that. With additional gym space, it just means that we're going to be able to do more AAU tournaments and those types of things. And so it's an opportunity, I believe.
This is a question not directly related to the building, but right now with the students, Michelle, separate all over, is it creating stress, discipline problems? Is there anything out of the normal that you would find in a middle school?
I think, certainly at the beginning of the year, we faced more of that at the high school campus because we had an unusual situation where the 8th graders were suddenly interacting at the same time with the high school students. And so we had some minor discipline issues that arose just because they were there together. We were able to work through that pretty well with working in conjunction with the high school administration and the high school students. I don't think that the student discipline has been impacted as much. I think that the greatest stress really is for the adults, which over time will ultimately affect the students. Right now, we have several teachers who teach in sometimes 3 different classrooms in a day, and for anyone who's taught, you kind of nest, and you get yourself set, and you have your lesson plan, and you want to be able to do your best for the kids that day. But if at the bell, you have to run out into the hallway as well and get to the next class at the same time the kids are, you don't have that opportunity to ever feel settled. There's also a huge disconnect. We have people traveling between the 2 sites, which is challenging. And then, you know, one of the things that I value and that I was excited to come to this district for is that it was a 3-year middle school program. Several have gone to 2-year programs because of space or things like that. But having a 3-year program allows us to really be able to build some continuity and some connectedness between the families and in the community. And having that connection to the school is what helps to build that cohesive program. And so we're really missing that. So.
I don't want to forget about this question that has come up lately, which is a little bit separate, but what are the other maintenance and building needs in the district right now? I've heard there are issues with the Lincoln roof. What's the district's long-term maintenance plan, and how much money a year is put aside for maintenance? It's a lot of questions.
Well, right now, we're looking at, for the summer, looking at several projects. We're not sure exactly which ones we're going to be able to fund. It'll depend on the priorities that we get established. We know that if we put if we ask, it's not Lincoln's roof, it's Valley View's roof. We know that if we can come in and put another overcoating on that roof, that we know we can extend the life about 7 years longer than what we really could, instead of having to just replace the entire roof. So that's one project. Will be over $200,000. Another project we're looking at is if you go into the high school parking lot, you'll see that it needs to be seal coated. There's a lot of, and we know that by doing that and taking these preventative steps, that in the long term, the cost would be less. We also know that we have 2 elementaries, Mount Stewart Elementary and Lincoln Elementary, that do not have an intercom system. And it's been a real concern, at least with me and building administrators, especially since the incident in Sandy Hook, of being able to communicate with the teachers in a very quick manner. When there was that issue over at Kittitas, instead of being able to go on the intercom and say we're going to do a lockdown, building principals have to go room to room in order to lock that building down. And so we're looking at an intercom system so that the principal can talk to the teacher can talk back to the principal, and the principal can talk to all the teachers at the same time. All those are very expensive items that we're looking at. We'll probably be able to fund 2, maybe 3 of those for the summer projects.
And the district has a budget for that sort of maintenance.
One of the things that you will see in this district is that we have, when we run our maintenance and operations and educational levy, that it's a line item levy, and then we just try to spend to those line items. And so there's a specific amount in the M&O&E for maintenance projects.
And what about long-term facilities needs post middle school? Lincoln, is that in need of replacement eventually, I'm assuming? Is that, have you done the longer-term facility plan?
We feel that the next building that we would have to address would be Lincoln. We also know that and I can't speak for the board, but we'll probably go through a similar process, not only for the Lincoln, but for all of our facilities. We felt that the input that we gained from the community, facilities planning community, was important. They reached out to thousands of people in the community, and so we want to go through the similar process. I know that it's something that I would not want to tackle until after the high school bond was paid off, To me, that wouldn't make sense, but it's certainly would be one of the things that we'd be looking at.
There's only roughly 22 years difference between Lincoln and Morgan in terms of when they were built. So, although Lincoln looks a lot better, but it's going to have to, I mean, that's in your long-term plan. Lincoln is going to have to be replaced.
I would either replaced or remodeled.
Yeah.
One of the things is it doesn't have wheelchair access. We don't have an elevator in Lincoln, so students
They're a
are.
pretty small gymnasium, very small.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's been maintained very well, and I had children that went there also, and I go there from time to time. But are you looking at, is there a plan that says in 5 years or 6 years, then we're gonna do this?
There is not. I believe it's the board's goal to put that team together. We do plan to do our strategic planning for the entire district. The last time we did a strategic planning was about 5 or 6 years ago. We've accomplished everything on that strategic plan except for one thing. And we'll find out about that on April 23rd.
Another question I get from the community, I hate to bring this up, but what happens if the bond doesn't pass?
The board has said that we're going to continue to move forward. We want to reunify the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I'm not sure if that would be by putting down additional portables at the Morgan site, or just how that we would end up going about doing it. There may be other options that we haven't considered, or that may be considered after if the bond does fail. But I do know that the board's goal is to move on, continue to move on, just like they did with Morgan and moving the 8th graders to the high school. But their ultimate goal is to reunify the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
Go ahead.
Oh, does that affect funding for kind of other projects you're trying to do? Would there be a trickle-down effect at all to try to address that?
Well, in order to, we would need another 10 portables,
Yeah.
another 10 portables, so like 200,000 a portable, and you get it down, and get,
How much again?
it's about,
I thought it was 100,000 for, well, there's a difference in price for if it's a plumbed or not, but it's.
100,000 for a portable.
yeah, that'd be 2 classrooms. And of course, the district doesn't have funding to do that. We would have to go out for a capital levy in order to do that.
So you need voter approval for that as well?
Yeah.
So one way or another, we need some money.
Well, and to do that, not only create, I can't even imagine from a safety perspective how to manage and create a safe and secure learning environment when we have, because every one of those is an open door to the building, and we would, if we were on the same side, we would lose all of our green space in order to make that. I can't even fathom what that suddenly becomes as far as running a school and providing the best for our kids in that situation.
Again, that'd just be something that we'd have to consider and moving forward.
Which underscores the importance of this election.
Another question that came up to me is, are you shooting for the moon? Could you really build a facility that would work for this much money instead of this much money?
What we've
I guess
asked,
it's a bit like, do you need to have a spare tire in the vehicle and air conditioning? Is there a bare bones approach?
well, what we have heard from the community over and over again is that there's a lot of community members felt that there was some wasted space with the high school. There's other people in this community who think that high school is just absolutely gorgeous.
I've heard both.
Right. And so what we feel is that this new facility would be functional and efficient, and we would have community members help in the design of that space. And one of the things to keep in mind is that the bond proposition, because one of the other things we've heard is that community members wanted all of the state assistance to go towards the middle school project. Therefore, the only thing the state assistance dollars can be used for is the middle school project. And if there's any money left over, then it goes back to buy down the bond. And so I'm kind
See,
of,
that's a good point, because that was brought up to me, and it was like, well, what if there's extra money? You can do whatever you want with it.
well, and that's what we heard, because the board did use some of those dollars for the high school bond to pay for the Mount Stewart roof. And of course, it would have been less interest to do that instead of going out for capital levy. We've heard that concern in the community. They want all the state assistance going towards the high school project. And that's why in the
The
bond,
middle school project.
or the middle school
Yeah,
project.
yes.
Thank you. And so all of those dollars will go towards the middle school project, and it's in the bond resolution. It cannot be used for anything else other than to pay down the bond.
This committee has never thought of anything elaborate from day one.
Well, I can speak to the idea of what even elaborate would be, because 3 years ago, I asked the staff, I said, what do you want? We've got a little extra money in our budget this year, what do you want? And their wants were things like, oh, I really need 5 more books for this book set. And I said, okay, set aside needs, if you need things. And so, the staff right now, if you were to go ask them, what do you want? What do you really hope for? There are still people who are saying, oh, if I could just have multiple outlets in a classroom, things that everybody else takes as a given for what would be in a modern building. And so I don't have any concern about anything being elaborate. I think we're really looking for something that's modern enough to provide for the best education we can now, and for what's maybe to come, having that infrastructure in place so that we can continue to have a great middle school program in this district.
One of the criticisms I heard regarding whether something's elaborate or the design's elaborate or not is why design for the 900 students when we have approximately 740, 750 now? When you calculate how much of an increase that would be in just over the next 40 years, and the building should live much longer than 40 years, it's only 0.5% growth per year. We're being very conservative with our projections for growth. And even though I think enrollments are leveling off a little bit right now, the projections over the next 20 years are that the enrollments are going to go up again. It really isn't prudent to not take into account some expansion of space for a building that's going to live more than 40 years. So this is actually only 0.5% per year over 40 years to get to the 900 students.
I always kind of turn it around a little bit, and what would the community think of the superintendent or the school board if right after 2 years after that building was built, you had to put portables down?
Yeah, yes, I thought about that.
Well, and when the newest wing of Morgan was built and opened 20 years ago, they had, at that time, empty classrooms in the old portion, and then last year we were at capacity, as we opened the door. So it seems like extra space to start with, but I think it gets filled up very quickly.
I asked a question about what would happen if it doesn't pass. What would happen if it does pass? What would change educationally for middle schoolers in the community?
I think that probably, first and foremost, is there's going to be an initial pride that's going to come with having a school that looks like a place that you want to go to. But I think there's going to be a lot of integrated projects with technology availability. A few weeks ago, the same day that an article had come out about just the need for talking about the Morgan Middle School stuff in the Daily Record, the same time something came out about a STEM project in the West Valley School District where they're talking about science, technology, and math integration. And I thought, holy cow, we can't even dream of that at this point. And so being able to offer, to meet those needs, but also one of the things that we don't have in our school is we're not built for any kind of flexible spacing. And so as we learn more about how kids learn, we know that sometimes we need to be able to pull groups aside and work with them, or send groups out to be able to extend their learning. And so having that flexible spacing would allow us to really individualize more and provide to meet the needs
search committees at the university, they look at the school, they look at the schools as perhaps one of the most important things. And I think it was said well by one of our committee members, and I can't remember who it was, it might have been John Graff, and it was picked up by Milton Johnston, the chair of the Economic Development Committee, Ellensburg Development Committee. Good schools make good communities will build good schools. And there's a vibrance that will be given to this community. We won't have a sore eye and probably take little criticism. We have good, excellent, in fact, teachers. So why not have facilities for our students, for our youth, that meet the needs of a first-rate community?
I've never talked to anybody who didn't think a new school is needed. That I can think of. I think that's a given, that the place is old, it's outlived, it's dead. So, but there's all these other questions, and that's why we're here to talk about these things.
It looks like we're almost out of time. I'll give you guys the last word. If you want to take a minute and summarize things.
I'd like to just mention that if people have questions, further questions that we haven't answered today, there is a really great website that was put together. It's supportebergschools.com, and it has information, detailed information about cost estimates and photographs of the existing Morgan facility, and various information about the financing and the cost of the project, etc. And I'd encourage you to go there or speak to any of us. I think our contact information is also on the web, so please, ask your questions.
Say yes, the time is right. Well, how else can I advocate it? I think it's an extremely important time right now for the education system in Ellensburg.
And I would just say that I was amazed this last fall when I saw this community come together when we had the Taylor Bridge and the Taylor Mountain fires. And to see that community spirit and know that that is the foundation of Ellensburg. And I'm hoping that this time around we can come together as a community and show that same support for our kids.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Joanna Markel with the Daily Record. Thank you very much, Steve Phillips from KXLE for joining us here. And thank you very much to the folks from the district for answering questions, Jim Pappas, Paul Ferris, Michelle Beedich, and Joanne Hillman. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our